So one of So, do you guys have a class in here?
Yeah.
Soon, do you?
Yeah.
At 3. Oh, interesting. Because I've got a class until 3:30. All right. Well, yeah. I'll see how I go with this. And when your lecturer arrives, we'll see what happens. Okay. Cool or not cool? We'll find out. So, to give you guys a bit of a heads up with task 2, or those of you at home, get you started on that this weekend, because it is something that you probably want to spend a bit of time reading over. So with your Mitcham City Council development plan, you want to sit down and dissect that, probably in a bit of a quiet space while you've got a bit of time. If you do have a quiet space and a bit of time. Generally in the classroom is not the best place to go over that thoroughly. So our development plans, as I've mentioned before, this is a space which is changing significantly, and these things won't be around. Well, they're slated to not be around for too much longer, but currently we are working with development plans. Your development plan, you can find that from the council website. Typically your council website will have a link to your development plan. Probably most of you saw that on the Mitcham Council website, but we saw that on the Unley Council website. There's a link to development plan. And you open that up, it's like a 250-page document. But it's not only on the relevant council website you can get a copy of that development plan, you can also get it from the essay planning portal. So that's a website I've mentioned previously, where you can get all the development plans. So what have we got here? Oh, that's an interesting one. Online zoning map. But where is it? Anyway, it's on here. It's on here. Oh, development plans and zoning, and then you can get development plans for any council area all over the state. But also on that essay planning portal is a whole bunch of information about what's happening. So new planning system by July 2020. So plenty of good information in there for you to stay abreast of the changes that are happening. So development plans may contain, or primarily always contain, an index. They're a very large document, so they'll have an index, and you can just go to that index and find what you need. I don't really need to tell you how to use an index, but general provisions. So that's another thing which changed recently, is some of the wording around this, which I thought it's interesting that councils have started. It always used to be called council-wide objectives, but now they're starting to be called general provisions. Anyhow, there are things which councils will make at the start of their development plan a broad statement about what they want to be achieving within their council area and the development. So they'll say that residential development must have setbacks of this, and that it must be to a certain height, etc. So they'll cover things like setbacks and whatever in their general provisions, as well as saying things like they won't overshadow other dwellings, etc. So you read the council-wide objectives first, or the general provisions, but then when you find out what zone that you're in, you go into that zone and it will say setbacks of minimum 6 metres. So in general, in council-wide it said 8. In my zone it said 6. What do you go with? Well, you actually go with your zone-specific thing. But if something's not covered specifically within your zone, but you're told to do it in the general provisions, you have to do that anyhow. So the makeup of what you have to do to meet planning is an amalgamation of what's in the general provisions, and you do everything in that unless it's overridden by something specifically for your zone. Okay? Another instance of that is if you're in some sort of historic area. So your general provisions won't cover all the things about a historic area, but your specific zone will. So that's the general provisions and zone provisions. But then we've also got policy area provisions. So you can have, so we can be in City of Mitcham, residential 2 zone, policy area 5. Or it might be policy area Cudmore Terrace or something. They'll have specific policy areas for little bits and pieces saying at this place you can only do a picket fence, or you can only have a roof pitch of steeper than 33 degrees, etc. They have all these little things specific for policy areas. So you're going to have to read the general provisions, find out what zone you are, read those zone provisions, but also know which policy area you're in, if you happen to be in one. Not all places have a policy area. And then sometimes, very rarely, you're going to have precinct provisions. That's not common. But yeah, there are, so precinct provisions, areas that tend to be smaller than policy areas with specific attributes, usually a sub-area within a zone or policy area. So council, zone, policy area, precinct division. Not common, but that you'll see them. I don't think.
We're actually in a precinct here.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
Definitely we're in a precinct here. Yeah, but none of our projects are. So you won't be dealing. No, none of our projects are for this subject. So you won't be dealing with that in this, but you will. Yeah, you'll come across it.
Yes.
Definitely. But then also you have tables. So in your development plan, there's a bunch of tables and there's also a bunch of maps. The maps have now kind of become a little bit more redundant because, you know, SA Map Viewers are including a lot of that stuff. But yeah, you've got tables and maps.
My page right, it's missing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
From that minute.
What's missing?
I forgot to take it out, so I came running and.
Oh, maybe. Oh, what's her name? Took it for you. She didn't say anything. Oh yeah, not this.
Oh God.
Do you have?
Oh God, that
quickly
is
pause
my
that.
important. Everything is.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll just
my
pause the
last
recording.
semester's course, everything is there.
So yeah, within your development plan, then you have tables and maps. With our first project, we're not really dealing with tables. We're dealing with maps a little bit, but a lot of that information is now an SA Map Viewer. You won't really be dealing with tables and maps. But in project 3, certainly you will be dealing with tables. Because we're it's a commercial property, we've got parking, for example. So yeah. So your general provisions, council-wide policies that apply across the entire council area that explain this is what we want. And residential in our council is like this. This is the sort of stuff which is now, I don't know, not being gotten rid of, but just all mashed together under the new planning and development code. And then your zone provision. So that's a map showing different zones. So if anybody familiar with this area here, yeah, you know, you'll see. Okay, well, we've got these zones heading down. Does anybody know what street that is? That's the Torrens there. This would be Croydon and
Grange Road.
Grange Road. Yeah, it might be Grange Road. Yeah, yeah. And so, in fact, I reckon you're right. Yeah. And then that's Port Road over there. Yeah. And so there are specific zones, and you see those zones follow these areas. You go, okay, that's because they're this particular use like that. So specific geographic area in which specific policies apply, such as residential zone or commercial zone. You also, from time to time, you also get zoning changes as well. And it's not typical that individuals affect zoning changes, but you might end up working in that as well. Somebody I studied with did end up doing that. So their job was to work for Centro supermarkets to produce really big information packs to convince councils that you need a supermarket in this area. In fact, you need a supermarket right there, in that bit there. We need you to change the zoning to get that to happen. That there is a, yeah.
Excuse me, what's your name?
Michael.
Michael, okay, I'm looking for David. That's
David Clothier.
I'm not sure his last name. The front office just gave us his first.
Right, okay, I'll stop this and I'll help. Recording. There we go. So, yeah, got our different zone provisions. So I'm going through all of this for task 2. You're going to have to dissect the development plan for task 2. And you're going to have to answer questions based on that. But then you're also going to have, after you go through that process, reread the client's brief again. So reread the brief and say, is there anything that doesn't fit within this zone? So the client wants to do this stuff. Is there anything that's a really bad match for us? And look, the really simple answer to that in a nutshell is no, the client doesn't want to do anything particularly outrageous on project 1. It's going to be quite simple for you, but explore and go through that process. So you looked at zones, you've got policy areas. So here we've got policy area 13, policy area 14. So that's in the centre of the city. People recognise that location. We've got Rundle Street there, Pulteney Street here, North Terrace there. People know that. So we've got policy area 13. That's owned by the university now, isn't it? That building there. I can't remember what that's used for. But basically, we have a different policy happening here than what we have happening here. So policy area 14, that's all retail and cafes. It's high foot traffic and very public space. Number 13, or policy area 13, it's predominantly vehicular traffic, less foot traffic, larger commercial type entities, and institutional uses. So we have different policies happening there. And then precinct provision. So this is a place, I think it's Woodside, where there's actually a specific precinct within a policy area for that. You won't really encounter that very often at all.
It's almost like policy areas are about conservation and precincts are about development.
Or there's something that's going. It's often something that is going to happen in this bit.
Yeah.
And then tables. So I mentioned off-street vehicle parking or vehicle parking for project 3. Yeah, you'll be referring to tables and maps. So not everything is on SA Map Viewer, by the way. Or maybe this has made it there now, but airport building heights map. Can be important things because like we have airplanes that fly over the metropolitan area, they come and land, and they over North Adelaide they get pretty close. But then there are other maps you use as well from you. So when you go and have a look at the development plan for the City of Mitcham, flip through your maps as well, see what maps are available. That's pretty much the only way to do it, is look at that map index and go, oh, there's a map for that, and that, and that, and that, and that. Oh, I might want to have a look at that. Right. And that's it.